All right, let's just dive right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a narrative that is, quite frankly, an absolute masterclass in chaotic, slapstick storytelling. Now, on the surface, the source material we're looking at today is just a very brief, 3D animated Pakistani short story. It sounds incredibly simple, right? But as we break it down, you're going to see that it's actually this perfectly structured tale of unintended consequences, sudden chaos, and ultimate community joy. We're calling it The Great Watermelon Heist, and I am so excited to deconstruct this village chase with you today. Let's look at the foundational text that sparks this whole wild sequence.
Okay, so here is the exact quote that kicks this whole thing off, which translates simply to, "A farmer feeds his goat a watermelon." It then goes on to describe the goat actually picking up the watermelon, running all over the village, the children chasing it, and finally the watermelon breaking so all the kids get pieces and eat with joy. Now, what is really fascinating here is that this single run-on sentence contains an entire cinematic universe. I mean, it's got a beginning, a middle, an explosive climax, and a completely heartwarming resolution. Our goal in this explainer is to kind of slow down the tape and examine the sheer narrative mastery hidden right inside this tiny, brief description.
And that brings us to the big central question. How on earth does one runaway goat manage to feed an entire village of kids? This is the core mystery we're going to solve together. It takes a super simple moment of feeding an animal and transforms it into this fascinating mystery of accidental community joy. By the time we wrap up this explainer, you'll understand exactly how a moment of pure, unadulterated slapstick comedy perfectly engineers a shared feast.
All right, let's start with Phase 1, the farmer's innocent gift.
This sequence sets up a completely classic four-act narrative arc. Step 1, the farmer feeds the goat. Step 2, the goat runs with the melon. Step 3, the kids chase the goat. And Step 4, the melon shatters and is shared. When you lay it out like this, you can see how logically the source material flows from a really quiet, isolated action into massive, sweeping, village-wide movement. Keep these 4 steps in mind because they're basically a roadmap for the rest of this explainer.
Now, to truly understand how this story ticks, we have to look at the motivations of our cast of characters. First up, we've got the well-meaning farmer. His only goal is just to feed his animal. He's the catalyst, but he is totally clueless about the chaos he's about to unleash. Then we have the opportunistic goat. This guy takes a peaceful offering and literally weaponizes it into a high-speed pursuit. And finally, we have the swarm of chasing children. They're the reactive force, instantly drawn in by the sheer spectacle of a goat absconding with a giant piece of fruit. These 3 distinct factions coming together, that's what creates this perfect storm of village chaos.
Moving right along to Phase 2, the Great Village Chase. This is the crucial inciting incident. The source text explicitly tells us that the goat picks up the watermelon and just runs all over the village. The goat transforms instantly from a passive, innocent receiver of food into an active agent of total, unpredictable chaos. And it doesn't just trot away. The text implies an absolute village-wide sprint. The sheer energy of this moment shifts the entire genre from a quiet pastoral scene straight into a high-stakes action sequence. Which honestly begs a hilarious question. Where exactly is the goat even taking the watermelon? Because as the village kids relentlessly pursue it, we kind of have to realize that the goat almost certainly has absolutely zero escape plan. Think about it. It's an animal carrying an object nearly the size of its own head. The suspense here isn't about if the goat will get away, but rather when gravity and basic physics are finally going to catch up to it. The tension is just building and building with every single step that goat takes.
And that brings us to Phase 3, the climax, the shattered watermelon.
Structurally speaking, a climax is the most intense, exciting point of a narrative. In the context of our 3D animated source material, the climax is a stolen watermelon violently hitting the dirt. All that built-up kinetic energy from the goat sprinting and the huge swarm of kids chasing it abruptly halts the very second the fruit meets the earth. It is the fateful moment that the entire story has been speeding toward right from the very first sentence.
And as the source text reveals, the watermelon breaks, creating perfectly sized pieces for everybody. Notice how the sudden destruction of this prized object isn't actually a tragedy at all. In fact, it's the brilliant key to resolving all of the story's built-up tension. The breaking of the watermelon is the exact thing that instantly transitions the story out of its chaotic climax and right into its resolution.
Which leads us to the final act, Phase 4, accidental joy and sharing. There is such brilliant structural symmetry here. Think about the isolated beginning of our story. One goat and one whole watermelon. It was a totally closed loop. But compare that to the community-wide feast at the end. many children, and many pieces of watermelon. The narrative perfectly mirrors itself. It takes a singular, highly private moment and violently, hilariously expands it into a communal event.
So, the crucial point boils down to a literal one-to-many ratio. It is a beautiful mathematical transition. A single whole melon meant for one single animal is broken down by sheer accident into a shared bounty for an entire village. The goat's heist wasn't an act of greed, right? Narratively speaking, it was just a really aggressive, rapid distribution method.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from the source material. All the kids get pieces and they eat them happily. This is the absolute pinnacle of accidental community joy. A totally chaotic heist, a village-wide panic, and a shattered piece of fruit unexpectedly lead to a perfect, tasty resolution where literally everyone wins. All that tension is completely dissolved by the simple act of sharing something sweet.
Which leaves us with a fun final thought for today's explainer. What other chaotic accidents in life are actually just setting up our next shared feast? It's pretty fascinating how a purely chaotic sequence can result in such perfect structural harmony. So the next time you see a plan fall apart, or maybe drop and shatter like a runaway watermelon, remember this short story. Ask yourself if those broken pieces might actually be exactly what everyone around you needed. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and hey, keep looking for the brilliant structures hiding inside the simplest of stories.